My name is Iris Joy, and this is Hope in Real Life, Healing Through Honest Conversations. I created this podcast because so many of us are walking around carrying things we've never had space to talk about, things we've lived through, things we're still trying to understand, and things we're learning to heal from. And sometimes just hearing someone say, "You're not alone," can start the healing process. Welcome. Today, I want to talk about something that affects every single one of us, whether we realize it or not. It's the biological and social roots of mental health. Understanding what shapes our emotions, our reactions, and even our struggles can help us show ourselves more grace and help us support others with more compassion. As I've grown personally, spiritually, and through my social work studies, I've learned that our mental health is shaped by so many layers. Some of those layers are inside of us, like genetics and brain chemistry, and others are outside of us, like our environment and our relationships, and they all matter. So let's talk about it. Let's make it real. Let's make it human. You know, when I first started learning about biological influences in mental health, it honestly gave me a sense of relief. For so long, especially during certain seasons like the fall and the winter, I noticed my mood would change. But back when I didn't understand what was happening, I would ask myself, why am I feeling this way? And what's wrong with me? But learning about the biological side of mental health helped me see that some things really are happening inside the body. Researchers talk about how genetics and stress response systems can make some people more sensitive to life pressures. And when you hear that, it makes you realize this isn't about weakness, this is about biology. Genetics play a role. Some people really are born with a greater vulnerability to depression and anxiety. And that doesn't mean someone is destined to struggle, but it does mean their brain may respond differently to stress. And speaking of stress, I've lived through some seasons where it felt non-stop. The one time that always comes back to me is 2010. Back then, the economy had shifted fast and hard. And I went through working in the county for the Department of Health and Human Services. Then I went on to work for human services, human assistance. And then eventually I ended up unemployed. What people often don't know, unless they've lived it, is how quickly a stable life can turn into survival mode. At the time, I was a single mom raising five boys, five growing boys, five hungry boys, five completely different personalities, and one me, one mom trying her absolute best to keep the world from touching them too harshly. I remember one night in particular, the boys were finally asleep, backpacks tossed everywhere, shoes by the door, dishes still in the sink because I didn't have the energy to finish them. I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out in front of me. The house was quiet in that heavy way that makes your thoughts loud. And I remember looking at the numbers on those bills and thinking, how am I going to do this? There's this pressure that comes with being a single parent that doesn't always get talked about. The pressure to be strong, the pressure to be the provider, to be the safe place, to be the one who figures things out, even when you don't have the answers. And during that season, I didn't have the answers. I had faith, I had determination, but I also had fear. It wasn't just financial stress, it was the uncertainty, the fear, the weight of being responsible for five kids who depended on me for everything: food, stability, emotional safety, all of it. And in those quiet moments, after I wiped away the tears that I didn't want the boys to see, my body was carrying all that stress. I just didn't know it yet. But now, as I've learned more about mental health, I've come to understand something important. Those reactions weren't character flaws, they were biological reactions to real pressure. One article I read explained how chronic stress releases cortisol. And when cortisol stays high for too long, it affects the brain, especially areas like the hippocampus, which helps regulate emotions. I didn't know that then. I just knew I was depleted, overwhelmed, and like I was barely holding it together. But my biology was trying to protect me, not punish me. And that brought me so much understanding later in life. So, yes, biology matters. And learning that gave me language for things I had been feeling my entire life. But biology is only one piece of the story. Because even if someone has a biological vulnerability, their environment can either support their healing or make things harder. And that brings me to the social side of mental health, the part that happens outside of us. According to a 2023 study I read, things like housing, employment, food insecurity, community safety, education, discrimination, they all have a real impact on mental health. These aren't just social issues, these are mental health issues. And I see this every day in my work, in the community. I see it in the stories people tell, in the challenges they carry. Huh, I see it in my own story. Unemployment didn't just shake up my finances, it shook up everything: my confidence, my patience, my sleep, my ability to stay present, my energy for my boys, everything. And according to the research, that's normal. Job instability and financial pressure can trigger real biological changes that affect mental health. And then there's what I experienced raising my son who has ADHD. There's something different about parenting a child whose mind moves faster, louder, and more directions than the world is ready for. When he was younger, school was tough for him. He didn't want to feel singled out or talked about, so he pushed back on the support he needed. And because he felt embarrassed or misunderstood, his frustrations sometimes showed up in behaviors that were hard for him. And honestly, hard for me to navigate. But what people don't always see is everything that happens behind the scenes. I remember trying to get him ready in the mornings, the rushing, the repeating myself 10 times, the battles over simple things like socks and shoes, or remembering which day was picture day. And the whole time, I could see that he wasn't trying to be difficult, his mind just worked differently. He was overwhelmed, overstimulated, and trying to navigate a world that wasn't built with kids like him in mind. There were days I would get a phone call from the school before noon, letting me know he was struggling again. And after hanging up, I would just sit there for a moment and close my eyes and breathe because being a mom and being his advocate felt like a full time job. But what hurt the most wasn't the behavior, it was watching his little shoulders tense up, watching him shrink under expectations he didn't feel he could meet, watching him try so hard to be good without understanding why his brain didn't always cooperate. He wanted to do well, he wanted to fit in, he wanted to be accepted. But the structure of the school environment didn't make room for kids who didn't fit neatly into a box. And as I walked with him through those years, the meetings, the phone calls, the many tears, the small victories, I learned so much about patience, compassion, and advocacy. His journey taught me what it means to meet someone exactly where they are, not where the world expects them to be. And honestly, I think God used those moments to help prepare me for social work because supporting him required every skill I know. It required every skill that I use today with clients: empathy, consistency, presence, and the ability to see potential even on the hard days. Research confirms what I already knew from experience. Early school experiences and social pressures shape how the brain responds to stress later in life. And living through that helped me understand why social environments matter just as much as biology. And then there's the larger community level. I've worked with families dealing with unsafe neighborhoods, food insecurity, discrimination, and all sorts of challenges. One study on post crisis mental health explained that after disasters or community level crises, people with fewer resources or supports face greater mental health risks. And this makes sense. Healing isn't just about what's inside you, it's also about what's around you. When you put all of this together, the biology, the environment, the life experiences, you start to see how mental health really works. And you also see why we need to approach healing in a way that honors all these layers. And that brings me to the mind body connection. One approach that I love, both personally and professionally, is mindfulness based stress reduction. This is the practice that helps calm the nervous system, lower stress hormones, and create space for emotional regulation. It's a way of helping the body and the mind work together. I've been walking 3 miles several times a week because I realized my physical health was affecting my mental health. And honestly, the clarity and balance I feel afterward, it's real. It's a reminder that movement, breath, and stillness matters. And for clients, practices like mindfulness can reduce stress, improve focus, and support healing from both biological and social stressors. And this is why all of this matters so much for social workers and really for anyone trying to support people. When we understand the biological side, we treat people with compassion. We understand that the brain responds to trauma, stress, and genetics in ways that are outside someone's control. When we understand the social side, we become advocates. We see the systems. We challenge the barriers. We help people get the resources they need. And when we put both of these things together, the biological and the social, we meet people where they are. We don't just look at symptoms, we look at stories, we look at strengths, we look at what's happened to them, not what's quote unquote wrong with them. That's the heart of social work. And that's the purpose of this podcast, to help us all understand how hope is built, one real life conversation at a time. Thank you for joining me today on Hope in Real Life. I hope something you heard encouraged you, gave you clarity, or reminded you that you're not alone in this journey. If this conversation spoke to you, feel free to share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Until next time, take care of yourself and be gentle with your heart. I'll see you next time on Hope in Real Life, healing through honest conversations.